Then you shall have what you seek for one last fight.
The second season of X-Men 97 just came to an end. And oh, what an exhilarating ride it's been. For most of the season, we simply kept guessing how our favorite mutants would end the tyranny of Apocalypse after the rise of his reign during the 90s timeline. But nothing could have prepared me for how Gambit became the literal embodiment of Apocalypse after having his consciousness take over his body. But more so, it was amazing to see how Rogue leveled up her abilities to do what 3 different teams of mutants couldn't. However, every power upgrade comes at a great cost. While Rogue made a deal with Eson, the Searcher, to save Remy's life and put an end to Apocalypse's tyranny, it came at the cost of her life. But shockingly enough, Nightcrawler went in to make another deal with Eson and offered up his life instead, believing that his sacrifice would not only bring happiness to the people he loved, but also push the X-Men to build a better world. Honestly, it was truly a bittersweet ending, and it's been nothing short of exciting to witness just how deep X-Men 97's gone into the Marvel Comics lore in order to adapt the series while also keeping things super refreshing. The best part about the animated series has been how it depicts the entire comics arc and major events without resorting to any linear storytelling. It really can't get better than this. Having said that, I understand that we focused a bit too much on Apocalypse this season, but only the OGs know that En-Sabanur could never have become Apocalypse without Eson the Searcher, the cosmic being who fueled his reign of tyranny. So today, we're going to discuss who Eson really was in the Marvel Comics lore, and walk through his entire walk through the panels. Without wasting another moment, let's get right to it.
I am the tide that carries all to the rocks of the eternal shore.
Who is Eson the Searcher? Making his first appearance in the 9th issue of the Eternals comics, Eson was actually one of the Celestials from the very first universe, the first cosmos. So, the Celestials actually rebelled against their creator, the first firmament, and the Esperance, thus shattering the entire first cosmos in the process. That's also what led to the formation of the very first multiverse, and led to the beginning of the multiversal cycles. The Celestials then started creating or appointing many beings to serve their cause. This even included the Omegas, Kalhora, and the Exterminators. Now, every time the multiverse came to an end, the Celestials simply passed on to the next incarnation. At some point in the timeline, they also started to assign Kings in Black before eventually splitting across the multiverse. In fact, the counterparts of all Celestials are actually interconnected facets of themselves, which means they're not really separate beings. According to that, Eson of Earth 616 is actually just one facet of the real Eson. Having said that, as one of the Celestials, Eson holds boundless cosmic powers in the palm of his armored hand. He joins his other fellow cosmic kin to travel across the worlds and observe planets, create life, and experiment on different species. Like most of his kind, Eson's origins remain largely unknown, but the Celestials are closely bonded to eternity, the embodiment of time, and have carried out actions that appear to only follow eternity's will. As the quester and the seeker among the cosmic entities, Eson travels with other Celestials as part of a group known as the Host, where he was one of the first and fourth Celestial hosts that visited Earth. Now, these visits usually happened in stages, with the Celestials eventually returning to judge the worlds they have observed. During their time on Earth, Eson and his fellow Celestials were observing Miami, Florida, before they encountered the deviants from the Isle of Lemuria, who were an evolutionary offshoot of humanity which were created by the Celestials themselves. When the deviants turned against their creators and manipulated humans into attacking them, Eson responded by destroying their home of Lemuria by absorbing all their energy, attacking the homes of all Lemurians, by probing it with his hand and basically forcing them all to either flee or drown. You have to understand that as a Celestial, Eson has absolutely extraordinary cosmic abilities to a point that we can't even comprehend the full extent of his powers. He's powerful enough to destroy entire planets and may even be capable of affecting stars. He can also communicate telepathically across vast distances and even across time and space. Much of his immense cosmic energy is contained within the elaborate armor that he wears. Eson generally works alongside his fellow Celestials, particularly Arishem the Judge, who leads their missions to Earth, and together they observe civilizations, weigh their actions, and ultimately decide whether a world is worthy of surviving. Having said that, in the second volume of X-Men, issue number 186, when En-Sabanur had his first encounter with the celestial ship AI, that is when Eson first started telepathically speaking to him, and offered a proposition that would change his life. Eson told Nur that he could choose the celestial technology to gain incredible power and shape the future of the world, or walk away and forget their entire encounter. Of course, Nur chose the first option, and Eson selected him to become Apocalypse. However, Eson warned that the gift came with a price, because someday, perhaps centuries or even millennia later, the Celestials would return to collect what they were owed. Eson later returned to Earth as part of the fourth host and arrived in Peru alongside 9 other Celestials. There, they faced an attack from the Destroyer, the Unimind, and Thor. Despite the threat, the Celestials managed to drive their attackers away before ultimately deciding that Earth was worthy of survival before leaving the planet. Eventually, around 400 CE, Eson was traveling through deep space when he encountered Lacey Lorraine and Paluk, who were searching for a powerful device capable of triggering metamorphosis. By that time, Eson realized that the device had already been stolen, but before he could learn more, Paluk abandoned Lacey and left her to face the Celestial alone. Eson attacked her, believing that she'd been killed, and eventually left without realizing that Lacey had actually survived due to her extraordinary durability. Many years after that, Eson was resurrected by the Queen of Nevers as part of the fifth host in a group of Celestials who were assembled to stop the first firmament from conquering the multiverse. We see him next during the arrival of the final host, when a badly injured Eson came crashing down to Earth alongside several other Celestials. Many of them were already dead with their bodies falling from the sky. However, Captain Marvel managed to prevent Eson from crashing into the heart of Manhattan, but Eson was still in terrible condition. Before the battle was over, he teleported She-Hulk to Robbie Reyes' location and attempted to help the Avengers fight the final host. Unfortunately, Eson was eventually killed in the conflict. Of course, his story didn't end there because during the final battle between the Avengers and the Dark Celestials, the Horde reanimated the bodies of all fallen Celestials, including Eson. To stop the Horde, the Avengers combined their powers to create a Unimind in order to overwhelm the creatures and force them into dormancy. With the Horde defeated, the Celestials were restored to life and joined the Avengers in taking down the remaining Dark Celestials. Eson's adventures across the multiverse. Like I previously said, the Celestials exist throughout the multiverse simultaneously, but their different versions are actually aspects of the same cosmic beings. Even so, these alternate versions can have completely different histories and experiences from their counterparts in the main Marvel universe. One version of Eson the Searcher visited Earth 8101, but his most notable alternate universe appearance was on Earth 9997, the world of Earth X. Here, Eson belonged to a race of Celestials that had evolved beyond physical bodies, and instead of reproducing in the traditional sense, they implanted their essence into planets, where it eventually would develop into a new Celestial. To protect these developing Celestials, the race would genetically alter the inhabitants of the planet, thus accelerating their evolution while also making them more aggressive. Now, Earth was one of these planets, but the issue is that humanity's evolution accelerated much faster than anyone expected. So the Celestials feared that the population could become a threat to the unborn Celestial growing inside the planet. Eson and the other Celestials therefore traveled to Earth with the intention of wiping out all life on the planet. Before reaching Earth, they were initially stopped by Black Bolt on the moon, but Eson and the other Celestials simply killed him to continue moving towards their target. On Earth, however, humanity and its allies refused to simply give up. Namor led an army of sea creatures against them, while Tony Stark deployed an enormous robotic factory and an army of Iron Man robots. The Asgardians, on the other hand, were led by Loki to join the fight. Sadly, these forces couldn't defeat the Celestials, but they managed to buy the Earth enough time for something far more powerful to arrive. Before his death, Black Bolt had summoned Galactus to Earth. However, this version of Galactus was actually Franklin Richards, who had taken on the identity and was powerful enough to drive back the Celestials. After realizing that the battle was no longer in his favor, Eson simply chose to retreat rather than continue fighting. Eson was again seen on Earth 13122, where the Guardians of the Galaxy fully derailed his plans by rescuing the residents of Xandar after Kang called for a rather weak Eson from the end of time to eviscerate them. The Guardians apparently managed to successfully take him down with a gravity mine, and just like that, Eson was sent back to his time. In the same multiverse, Doctor Strange later summoned Eson's hand to take down Kang during his final battle with the Avengers in Chronopolis. Then, on Earth 17628, Eson was part of the Celestials who tried to bring in light to the universe before finding themselves facing against Null. Unfortunately, the Celestials were all defeated after Null created the Clintar to use it against them in battle. That whole fiasco certainly didn't end well, because nobody knows if Eson was one of the few who ended up surviving and fleeing to the farthest corners of space, or if he was actually killed. Then again, in the first issue of the Timeless Comics, Earth 20208 was being pruned from time by Immortus and the whole reality was dying from entropy. But then, Reed Richards ended up killing all the Celestials, including Eson, just so he could drink their blood in order to gain the power to save their timeline. Coming to one of the biggest events that happened in the second season of X-Men 97, on Earth 92-131, Eson was preparing for En Sabah and a group of time-displaced X-Men to arrive in Egypt. That's why he hid ship in the desert at a location that eventually came to be known as the Lost Temple. After En Sabah was born, Eson watched him from afar, waiting for the right moment to reach out. And eventually, years later, when a time-displaced Professor X was searching the mind of Logos for information about a lost temple, Eson reached out to him. His message ultimately helped Nur and the time-displaced X-Men locate the temple where Nur discovered the story of his destiny carved into the walls of the ship. When he touched a death seed, he was transported to another dimension, where he came face to face with Eson for the very first time. The Celestial then used the death seed to transform Nur into Apocalypse, thus setting him on a path he was destined to follow. In the modern era of the 90s timeline, we see Eson again when Rogue entered Ship's Celestial Shrine. As you already know, she asked for his help to stop Gambit, who had become possessed by Apocalypse, and in return, Eson offered Rogue with another death seed, thus giving her the power she needed to defeat him. However, it came at a terrible price, as Eson asked Rogue to give up her life in exchange. But before she could pay that price, Nightcrawler stepped in and offered his own life to Eson instead, choosing to sacrifice himself so Rogue could survive. Then in the second volume and 14th issues of the Thanos comic, which is set on Earth TRN 666, Eson the Searcher became one of the many victims of the Great Thanos when he was in his eternal quest to please death. Unfortunately, Thanos slaughtered Eson and the other Celestials while they were trying to turn Black Bolt's destructive voice into a weapon. After destroying the Celestials, Thanos later used their enormous remains to construct a temple that would serve as his home for the rest of his seemingly infinite existence. Following this, Eson was seen in Earth TRN 909, where he and the other cosmic beings went against Adam Warlock to stop him from destroying that universe. However, Adam had gained almost a limitless level of power and was able to easily drive Eson and the other Celestials away. Eson's fate was even more tragic later on, especially after Annihilus used Adam Warlock's immense power for himself to try and conquer the entire universe. In the process, he wiped out Eson along with several galactic empires, including Galactus and the other Celestials, thus leaving the Cosmic Order in ruins. Finally, on Earth TRN 974, Eson the Searcher was one of the Celestials who visited Earth in its prehistoric days. During their time on the planet, the Celestials experimented on both dinosaurs and early humans. Their experiments on the dinosaurs eventually led to the creation of beings such as Fin Fang Foom, while their work on early humans gave rise to the Deviants and Eternals, thus forever changing the course of Earth's evolution. Having said that, I also want to recall the time we saw Eson the Searcher in the Guardians of the Galaxy film from 2014. Set on Earth 1999999, Eson was an ancient member of the Celestials in the film and one of the most powerful cosmic races in the universe. He was only the second Celestial to appear in the MCU, following the severed Celestial head that eventually became Nowhere, which was also introduced in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. At one point, Eson came into the possession of the Power Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, and with its immense destructive energy at his command, he was capable of wiping out entire planets. Here, we saw Eson demonstrate just how devastating the stone could be when he used it to blast across the surface of a planet, thus completely destroying it and vaporizing every living thing in his path. That sheer scale of destruction showed why the Power Stone was considered one of the most dangerous forces in existence. I really think what makes Eson the Searcher even more interesting is how his story connects X-Men 97 to the wider MCU and Marvel's multiverse. Marvel has established that Celestials across different realities are connected through a shared consciousness. In other words, their alternate versions can essentially be viewed as different aspects of the same cosmic being. This raises the possibility that the Eson seen in X-Men 97 Season 2 is connected to the same Eson who had appeared in the MCU. This connection becomes especially intriguing when we see how Eson transforms En Sabah into Apocalypse by using a large purple stone or crystal during his transformation. I know that it's the Death Stone, and the show never really directly confirmed that it was the Power Stone, but the resemblance is too hard to ignore. Given Eson's history with the Infinity Stones and the enormous power that Apocalypse gained from the transformation, it certainly felt like a deliberate connection, or at least a very interesting possibility. Well, that's my 2 cents on that theory. I certainly hope we see more Eson or the Celestials in the upcoming seasons of X-Men 97. Having said that, what are your theories about Eson's connection with X-Men 97 and the MCU? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next marvelous video. Stay safe, have a great one, and as always, stay marvelous.